So my project is Benedictus Sanitatis, which means blessed hell in Latin. And the building was a ruin, Monkbretton Priory, which is which is located in Barnsley. So it was a bit of a make-believe one, but it was lots of fun to do, and I really enjoyed like the concept of renovating a ruin, particularly because a lot of what I was doing was like installation architecture rather than I was working with what I had in terms of as you would with a building, but obviously with a ruin instead. So I had a bit more free range with it, kind of a bit more of like an architectural rather than an interior design route. This was the ruin. So I won't read the brief, but basically I was unwell in my third year, so I actually ended up resitting third year and doing 4 years at uni, and I was prescribed a lot of steroids, and in the end the kind of natural remedies that I researched myself and took were a lot more effective than the steroids I was given for my immune system. So I thought it'd be nice to, because there's a lot of nature on the site as well, I thought it'd be nice to kind of use what kind of ruined my uni experience to kind of hopefully save my uni experience. So I ended up basing the whole site on kind of like the power of nature and creating natural remedies and bespoke natural remedies. So people would come to the site and kind of have a consultation about their health, or they didn't even really need to be particularly unwell. But then there was also space for research within the site for medical students. And when you'd come and kind of had this consultation, you'd then go on a path around the site and you'd pick kind of your prescribed natural remedies, and then you'd go to a workshop and make them yourself, whether that was in like a tablet form or a cream or anything like this. And there's also like a tea room and a senses garden, which was inspired by one of my case studies in London, where the garden was split into the 5 different senses, and then obviously each kind of plantation in that section represent the sense that was in that section. So obviously like for smell, you'd have like really beautifully smelling plants, and then for sight they'd be really bright and colourful. And there was a monastic garden as well to link back to the history of the building, because it used to be a monastery for Benedictine monks. So the monastic garden would have plants in that the monks would originally use for remedies. So these are the main spaces. The big floor plan is like the main ruin, and then at the top I had a gatehouse and an administration building. And it was in a really strange location, like it was in the middle of a really dense housing estate, and then you'd like turn a corner and then it was just open green and really, really stunning. And all of when you were stood at like the north of the site, when you looked south, it was all just the landscape. So it was really beautiful. Like in comparison, it was a really nice contrast. And you can see that all the houses are around. So there wasn't actually any plans for the site, which I would not recommend at all. So I drew all these up on site. I hired a drone off a really nice guy who let me do it all for free, which was really nice of him. And took the iPad and took CAD and literally just sat on the grass with my Mac in the middle of Barnsley. Would not recommend. With an umbrella over me, and drew these up. These are the sections. And then as you can see, it's actually there wasn't loads left of it, but I enjoyed the fact that there was a solid floor plan to work with, which kind of defined my spaces. So it was quite overwhelming at times because it was a big site, and obviously there isn't masses like left of it. But in the sense that it was mapped out, it was quite handy because it almost gave me a route around site. And in the centre where I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, where that square is, that's the cloister. So that was actually originally open. So that was like their garden. So that was kind of nice to link to the root around site, because that could then be my main garden where all the herbs and natural remedies would grow. Just the ages, and then the different spaces, and then this was just part of the drone photography I did, and then I just for each space I did drone photography, a little bit about the history, the floor plans and elevations, a little model, and then either concept or key moves. So from kind of like the history of the space, what concept I was going to take forward into my brief. So for example, with this one, this is the gatehouse that was at the front of the building, and everyone would pass there usually to even I don't know, even though when I actually went, the site was totally open. You don't have to go through the gatehouse at all. It was all just like vast space you could walk through. When it was originally a monastery, everyone would have to go through the gatehouse. So I ended up, creating that kind of concept into my design and making sure everyone had to walk through there, and kind of I ended up doing it with hedges to make it more natural, but kind of fencing off the vast open space that you would usually walk in straight into. And so, for example, with this concept, this was a freighter, so where they used to eat, which is like the kitchen. It wasn't a massive space, but it was parallel. So that's where it is in the little grey shaded, and it was parallel to where the church was. So they'd come in, and the procession would usually be towards this way, and then there'd be a big window here. So with my concept, I put the church, the space is positioned landscape identical to the church remains situated to its north. Visitors could enter the space from the west and travel east towards the light as you would in a church, as well as hosting the picking preparation for the garden and workshop consultation. One of the main uses of the space would be the procession towards the medicine workshop. So I just really linked every single space to a concept that was to do with its original use. I would also really recommend doing this in the corner, like if you've got a big space like mine, just highlighting what space you're talking about, because when you do your project, when you talk about your project like 100 million times, to you it's really obvious, but I think it's good when you're speaking to someone else so they can keep up with where you're going on about. Oh, and this is a drawing of how it used to be. So when I was saying about the central garden, that's the space in the middle. And that's just the ghost of the building over the current ruin. About Benedictine monks. So this was the Benedictine monk timetable, which was actually a lot busier than I thought. When I think of monks, I kind of just think of peaceful, resting, calm, but it's actually it was quite full on. So they'd wake up at 2 and then they'd go to bed at 6. And they'd just be on a constant rotation of jobs and chores and things. So I kind of focused on the route around site and where the main locations were. And then I used that kind of concept for the wearable concept. So my wearable concept looks quite dark. So I didn't mean to be it wasn't intended to be so dark looking. So I dress in a tunic, like the monks would, and Benedictine monks wore black, so that's how I was in black. And then I was on a puppeteer structure to kind of show the control that the prior had over the monks. Obviously willingly, so they kind of were allowing themselves to have that control. And then when I kind of did the hand in, I was led by my friend who was dressed in black, by this rope around my waist. So that was them leading, and then I had a rope to my arms and my feet, and then I had the timetable names like Vigils and Prime across my face to kind of show the lack of identity that you had, and you were all just kind of one of the monks. You weren't, John. So it's just kind of removing that identity and the identity of the person before they became a monk. It's really hard to try and remember everything. I think that's it.
That's great.
And then I ended up handed it in as a pair, so I did the contrast afterwards. And then it's kind of like taking the own reins on my health and kind of how I kind of tried different things to try and basically just get myself out of a really horrible time. So it's kind of taking the own reins and nature taking over and wrapping around the rope. These are some concepts. So for the three enough constraints, defined path and route, and the three Benedictine vows. I ended up using them all like quite subtly, and then obviously I explained where I'd use them within the design afterwards. But I think the main one I probably used was three Benedictine vows, because that was like the pillar of being a Benedictine monk, basically. So this concept of doing things within threes. And this is my personal manifesto of how I like to design and everything I like. So I guess the decaying aspect and the stone aspect ended up being within my project quite heavily, which is why I guess I chose the project. It was really attracted to me. This is my personal manifesto. Didn't actually photograph very well, but I kind of acted out how I was feeling across the illness and how it got worse, and then there was like hope, and then I ended up getting better at the end, and then I put that into kind of stages and decayed the rock to like represent each stage. So the height of the space represents the level of health, and the human projection represents the emotions, and the depth of the cube represents the level of difficulty. So this is a building manifesto. So this is just kind of like the main shapes that I got when I was at the site, and like the key things I picked up on. And then I ended up putting it together in quite an abstract way. So I used the floor plan, but I didn't use the current architecture. So I literally drew over the floor plan into a shape, and then put these kind of shapes that I'd kind of taken from site over them. So it's really abstract, but it just gives you the language of what's currently there. And here I just explained like where I'd got all of these different shapes from. And then that's turning what I did before into something a bit more conceptual, and using the kind of the three Benedictine vows, so repeating things 3 times, exposing the structure and nature's takeover. This was my site combine, so it was the same kind of concept as the one before, where when you're at site you have to use what's there to imagine what used to be. So this one was kind of really abstract, and I used the floor plan because obviously you can see that now, but I used only the elevations that are currently there. So I layered to cut loads of those and laid them over each other to the height of kind of like what you would imagine it used to be. Obviously you don't imagine it would look like that, that's why it's like really abstract. But then I used that to create some really eerie shadows, which you do actually get when you're on site. So it kind of gave you the atmosphere that you get when the sun sets. This was just about the sense of sound that you get when you're on site. It's really silent as well, and you can hear, considering it's in a really kind of busy residential area and it's quite near a main road as well, it's so silent when you're on the site, and you can just hear all the nature. Obviously this looks really dark, but you can hear all the nature, and it is really, really pleasant and nice. But I was just thinking back to how it would used to be, and with the church bells and things. So I got quite into arches, and there's a lot of arch language, or kind of remains of arches on site. And I just did some spatial concepts. I thought about how I could use light with the ruin. So having a wall and kind of like a light gap onto the existing wall and light under the floor to show the ruin beneath. Actually ended up using this one, putting a flooring above my very small remains and almost making it like it had been excavated, even though I'd actually just built on top. And then I thought about water because obviously the link to nature, and there was a lot of links to water on site with the old systems that were still partially evident. So water underneath the floor to kind of guide you around site, or water on the side, almost creating like a moat. So I specifically looked at sage, researched into sage and all of the forms, research into plant cells and the structure of plant cells and how I could use that within the installations. And then these were my spaces, so the library, the consultation, the medicine garden, the medicine workshop, the shop and tea room, and the census garden. Oh, there's more. Oh, sorry, that's future spaces. Oh, they're the major spaces, and then the minor spaces were the gatehouse and the history of the priory, which was just a small room dedicated to the actual monastery, a seedling house, picking preparation, workshop consultation, monastic garden, and the garden storage. And then I just did some diagrams to show kind of each space and the journey as a customer that you'd go through. So they're my future spaces, public and private. So I labelled like the outdoor and indoor spaces because it was quite hard to kind of show which ones would be outdoor and indoor, because obviously the whole site at the moment was outdoor. And then this is my circulation idea. And then these are my spatial concepts. So I was quite lucky really with the site because there was a lot of concepts because the history was so in depth. But at the end of semester one, I just kind of wrote down all of the concepts that I'd got from the spaces. And then it was quite good actually when I came to design in semester two, and you did have a bit of like a mind blank. You could look back and see kind of all the concepts that link to the history. And then I just scanned in all my sketchbook. Well, I didn't do all of it actually, I just did a few bits, but some sketchbook pages at the end. And my research as well from the library. So that's semester one. Am I going too fast, Mariam, or is that fine?
No, it's perfect, thank you.
Okay. So this was looking into the future structure of the building, and I did some lino etching as well of the ashlar and the rubble on the inside, which construction of it was that remained. And it was really nice actually because it had kind of all the elevations were missing. I could get a full section of like the rock, which was really nice. So that was just the concept of 3 Benedictine vows again, just kind of exploring that. I had a look into vertical farming, and I ended up designing my own kind of system that was sustainable to the water on site. So this kind of structure was used in the seedling house to grow the plants to a certain size before they were planted in the main garden. Arches again. So this was planning out site now, and that was the hedge I was talking about before. So they'd have to go through the gatehouse. Ended up just having this as kind of like the garden storage space, because it was so separate from site, didn't really link to the journey that was going on around here. So people would enter here, and then you'd go into, this would be like the library area, and then there'd be a consultation. I'm trying to remember it all, so hard. And then you go into here, and you'd get like, it'd be a picking preparation, so you'd get your basket and your scissors, etc. And then you go all the way around the garden and pick up all your different medicines, and then you'd go down this procession into the workshop, and then you'd join down here in a cafe and tea room which overlooked the garden, and then you'd leave and you'd be outside in the census garden. So the census garden was open to the public, as was the tea room, and then the library was a membership, and then the actual journey was private, so just like on a booking system. So they're my public and private spaces. The route around the space, disabled access, different seasonal routes, because obviously you can't go outside and pick the plants all the time. So I actually had a few of most of the queues were outside, and then a few of them were double height, and then underneath there was almost like a greenhouse, and that would have the system I showed you before for the seedlings. That was I've gone off it. And that would have the I'm blank. I can't think of what they're called, like the plantation walls almost, and that was like feeding. Obviously you'd fit a lot more plants in them than you would in those just planted normally. So ended up having 3 spaces that were kind of like a greenhouse with loads of those in, so that in winter the place could still be open. And these are the floor plans. And these are the different kind of design methods I used: a handmade model, CAD model, SketchUp model, a V-Ray render from the SketchUp, and a 3D drone scan. And then these are all my spaces. That's the greenhouse room I was talking about. So in the summer you'd go around on all the different levels, and your kind of list would be numbered. So you'd have all your ingredients, and then it'd be in order. So you might have 3 from garden 1, and then it'd be obvious because I think there was 8, if I remember right, gardens. So you'd go into the square. Each garden was just a square. So you could kind of keep track of which one you're in, and they'd be numbered as well. And then you just go on a pathway to all the different ones, and then there was 3 at the bottom for winter.
Anna, do you mind
Yeah.
just explaining your spaces through the visuals that you did as well?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
These sections you mean, or through the actual visuals?
The visuals, yeah. And then these just kind of point out what the spaces are that you created.
Oh, sorry, I'm even breaking up.
The visualizations.
Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I can.
Bro. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Bro. Right, it's gone. Okay. Did you just mean these visuals?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So this was at the consultation space which overlooked the garden. Can make sure I'm at the beginning. Oh, no, I'm not. So this was the history room. So this is the site as it is, and then I had projections of all the archive material on the wall. It's quite a dark space, so the projections would be nice and bright. This was from the side of the site. So this was the history room, and then this was the consultation space up here. So you'd walk in here, and then that was a history room that we just saw. That's the main staircase. And then I had to do a path round here and into here, which is actually there, so that I could have a lift. That was really hard actually because obviously there was just stone staircases right in the entrance. I had to try and find like another way for a lift, and I managed to kind of divert the route. And then there was a library under here, and then a study space that was a little bit higher, which is up there. And then I had this like seating, which is based on the organic plant cells. And then you go up into the consultation rooms. So these are the consultation rooms, and then they overlooked the medicine garden. And this was the picking preparation at the start of the medicine garden, so you get your basket and things. And then you'd go, it was a one-way system, so you wouldn't get that. This was the seedling house, which was just like a staff, it's really, where all the seedlings would grow. And this was like the procession towards the medicine workshop. So when after you've done the journey, you'd come into here, and then you'd go down here, and on the end of this wall it was all glass, so it was really, it went from quite dark to really bright at the end, so it was almost kind of like when I was kind of getting better, and it was like that sense of relief that kind of you'd reached the end of a real dark tunnel. And it also links to the church concept of kind of heading towards the light. The visuals don't show it that well actually, but this is where I'd built above the ruin. This is the medicine workshop. And then this was the little shop that was on top of the tea room. And this is just explaining the senses garden, so the different senses as you went along. And then a monastic garden at the end. That's the garden storage that was on the top of the site. And then I just had a staff area at the top. And then my elevations. So this is the medicine workshop. This is the consultation, and then all of this is the garden. And this is the library, and then the kind of study area and then the main circulation to the consultation space. This is from the south, so you enter here, the staircase, or the going round to the lift, the library, study space, the census garden, and the garden, main garden, and then into the workshop there. And this is my model. That's it, I think.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Anna.